Hello, everyone. Today, I want to do a very short video on Ash Wednesday because Ash Wednesday coming up very soon. And some of my friends have been asking me about Ash Wednesday, and some of them have been actually laughing about it and making jokes. And some of them even told me that it's cult worship by the Catholics, and there is no biblical basis for it. And people don't understand why you wear ashes and go to church and wear ashes, and some of them are not able to even explain why they go to church and receive this ashes. So all kinds of innuendos and comments. And so I want to just kind of shed some light on it today in this short video. So after the feast of Christmas, one of the most popular days of the year for the Catholics to attend Mass, even if someone is not attending the Mass on a regular basis, is Ash Wednesday. On this day, what happens is more than 1 billion Catholics around the world, they go to church to receive ashes on their foreheads for whatever reason. So Catholic then begin the season of Lent. Okay, I am trying to move my PowerPoint along. Okay, there it is. So what is the meaning behind this practice? Are there any biblical roots for this practice? Because this happens in churches. So do we have any biblical roots? So ashes symbolize humility because they represent fundamental truth of human morality and the transient nature of earthly life, reminding us of our origin from dust and the eventual return to it. While it might appear to be an arbitrary ritual and often mistakenly seen as a display of self pity, it is a very ancient tradition that is fundamentally meant to lead us into a state of humility. Okay, I always like this quote by the great C.S. Lewis, one of the Christianity's most thought-provoking writers. If you haven't read any books, you should start reading them. Absolutely unbelievable a theologian and philosopher, and you can give him a lot of different titles. C.S. I believe there's a Clyde Staples Lewis. He wrote one of the masterpieces of Christianity, which is called the Mere Christianity. It was actually the BBC, if I recall, I think during the Second World or just after the Second World War, they invited him to do short radio lectures on Christianity, and he called them Mere Christianity, and they became so popular. He actually made it into a book, which is one of the major works, which really many people converted to Christianity after reading Mere Christianity. And I do apologize for this, that I digressed. And he said that humility is not thinking less of yourself. That won't be a good idea. It is thinking of yourself less. I always love that. Okay. So now let's just jump in and then see if there's any biblical roots. So wearing ashes is a badge of faith. That's what Catholics say. I get them every year because it's very reassuring feeling. Okay, the people, this is what they say. So it's beginning on a journey. It makes me reflect on my life. I'm not saying this. This is what people have said, that people that I've spoken with. The act of receiving ashes makes me ask the question, what can I give up from my life and change in my life to be a better person? Okay, this is how someone responded to a question, I believe, by a reporter. So let's see if there are any biblical roots at all to this practice. How would we begin at the very beginning when God made Adam from the dust? Okay, so in Genesis chapter 2, verse 7, God formed the first man, as we all know, Adam, from the dust of the ground and then breathes into his nostrils the breath of life, causing the man to become a living being, essentially signifying that God directly gave life to Adam through his breath. In fact, this verse emphasizes the intimate and personal nature of God's creation of humanity. Okay? So it didn't take long for God to give specific instruction what they must not be doing, and they must not eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. So this is the instruction, very clear instruction God is giving to Adam and Eve. Now, just a quick aside on this point, there's a lot of confusion about this instruction by God. Many people have said that they're not sure why God is forbidding Adam and Eve to have more knowledge. Sounds like a good question on the face value. This is why you need a good commentary when you read the Bible, as otherwise you'll miss the real substance behind many things. So, by providing the law about the tree in the garden, God gave Adam and Eve the opportunity to choose whether they respected his right as the creator to make rules. Because this is one of the rules he's probably testing them. Hey, you can go and eat from any of the trees. We are talking here thousands of trees, different tree, different fruit, different whatever, okay? Except this tree. Maybe God was just testing them if they will follow his instruction. Okay, it could be. So the tree itself was nothing special. He could have chosen any tree. It is probably the instruction that he was testing them. So the key factor was that God chose it for himself, and he wants Adam and Eve to know that. God did not want Adam and Eve to become God, although he created them in his image. I'll get to that in a moment. I'll explain what I mean by that. So, what is the meaning of this? Why God prohibited them, instruct them not to eat from the tree of knowledge of good and evil? Okay, here is my understanding from what I've read. God did not want Adam and Eve to be able to judge people. That prerogative is reserved for God. Okay, so just imagine, I'll give you a little example here. Your neighbor thinks that he knows what is right and wrong, and he tells you what to do because he knows he has eaten from the tree of the knowledge of evil, so he knows what's good and bad, and he's instructing you what to do. Would you accept that? So God is a forgiving God. Are we forgiving? Just look around. Look around a chaotic world. What the 6 o'clock news? So this is exactly Hitler told his people that he had the knowledge of good and evil and that he knew what he was doing. The result was the death of millions of people. How about Chairman Mao, Mao Zedong of China? He exactly told the same thing. He told Confucius and all those people that he knew he had the knowledge of good and evil. He knew what was good and evil. And what was the result? Because he said that as if he also ate from the fruit of the tree of the knowledge and good and evil. Okay, and he was all knowing and he was all capable of judging others like God. That's what he thought. That's what he actually told the people. So what was the result? Mao's policies were responsible for the vast number of deaths. Like, I think he's number one, more than Stalin, Hitler, and everybody. So I think Chairman Mao is just occupied the number one place. So, what happened was just like 40 to 80 million people, they were victims of starvation, persecution, prison labor, mass execution, and his regime has been described as the totalitarian. Okay, just imagine you give people the feeling that, oh, I have the knowledge of good and evil. They'll try to judge you. Okay. So I just a quick aside because people are confused. Why God? Because God will, make the sun shine on good and evil. Will we do that? No. So after Adam's sin, God informed him that he will toil the earth his entire life. It'll be frustrating and difficult. God was not pulling any punches. He just laid it out. Ultimately, Adam's lifelong work would end in what? This is the kicker. In death, and he would return back to the dust from which he was created. This is the key. Okay, so death was the final consequence of Adam's choice to sin. And so what we are doing, we are remembering what God told to Adam, that for you are dust, and to dust you shall return. Okay, that'll be in Genesis chapter 3, verse 19. So in the sweat of your face you shall eat bread till you return to the ground, for out of it you are taken, for dust you are, and to dust you shall return. So by receiving ashes on our forehead on Ash Wednesday, this is exactly what we are reminded of. So what God told Adam essentially meant that as a consequence of Adam and Eve's disobedience, humans will now experience toil and hardship in obtaining sustenance, and ultimately all humans will die and return to the dust from which they were taken, signifying the penalty of death brought on by sin. So, like I said, Ash Wednesday is essentially a reminder to all of us of Genesis chapter 3, verse 19. Okay, so where else we can find ashes? One of the most favorite books of mine is the book of Daniel. I can be wrong in here, but maybe some rabbis, some may disagree with me here. But I think the book of Daniel is so fascinating. I can't compare it with any other book in the Old Testament. Okay. It is so much stuff going on there in book of Daniel. It is almost like apocalyptic. Okay. And the Daniel as a character himself is just amazing to read. I don't know how many times I read the book of Daniel. Okay. It's just so exhausting. Okay. Now, in Daniel chapter 9, verse 3, we read that we see Daniel's dedication to seeking the Lord through prayer, fasting, and humility. This verse serves as a model for believers, of course, in approaching God with a sincere and contrite heart. You heard that before, right? Sincere and contrite heart. The use of fasting, sackcloth, okay? The sackcloth is almost like you're wearing something with needles, like pins and needles. It is just hurting you, okay? That's the sackcloth. With the ancient people, they used to sit in wearing sackcloth, okay? And ashes. So the use of fasting, sackcloth, and ashes was a common practice in the Old Testament as a sign of repentance, mourning, and humility before God. So by engaging in these practices, the prophet Daniel demonstrates his deep humility and longing for God's intervention. So the context, what I'm talking about here, in which Daniel is praying is, in the year, probably you already know this, it's one of the defining moments in the Jewish history. In the year 586 BC, and those who are not Christians, it'll be like before Common Era, the Babylonian kingdom conquers the southern kingdom of Judah, destroys the temple, and take all the Jewish people into exile. And this is what I said. This is one of the catastrophic moment in the Jewish history because the temple was everything for the Jewish people. Okay, so if you take all the monuments, for example, in the U.S., okay, the White House, the Pentagon, whatever they say, the biggest monuments, they revere and everything, put them all together, it wasn't enough to compare to the temple in Jerusalem. Because this were God came down to earth and he dwelt in the temple for the Jewish people. Okay, this is what they thought, the God, Yahweh, God dwelt in the temple on earth with them. Okay, so you can see the temple was destroyed by the Babylonians, and all the Jewish people were taken into exile to Babylon, and Daniel was one of them. I'm just setting the context where he's using this ashes and sackcloth and everything, okay? So the symbolism of fasting, sackcloth, and ashes in Daniel chapter 9, verse 3 is significant. Fasting is a physical act of abstaining from food, of course, as a means of drawing closer to God. It is a discipline that allows believers to focus their hearts and minds on seeking God. Sackcloth and ashes are symbolic of mourning and repentance. There we go again. Mourning and repentance. They represent a humble and contrite heart, acknowledging one's sinfulness and dependence on God's mercy. Okay? So there we have it. Another favorite book of mine, an amazing work, is the book of Job. You know how many commentators people have commented on the book of Job with this? We cannot have enough comments, okay? So let me set the stage here. So Job was a righteous man. Okay, so the book of Job, the story begins by introducing Job as a blameless and upright man. And he was highly favored by God. What happens is God was having one of his morning court sessions or whatever it is, okay? And then he looks at somebody kind of familiar and he says, "Oh, you are Satan. What brought you here?" Okay. So Satan says, "Oh yeah, good to see you, God. I just dropped by." And then he's a Satan, right? So of course he has something up his sleeve, and he challenges God. "I have a challenge for you. It's a wager." Okay. So let's call this a heavenly wager. Okay. Now Satan is there for a reason. Okay. To create trouble, of course. So he creates a challenge for God, and he claims that Job only serves God because of his blessings. And he gives a wager to God, and he says, "If you give me the power to test Job, I can prove it to you, God, that if we take away what he possesses now, all his possessions, he's rich and happy and a lot of camels, and he has got a lot of stuff. Because you blessed him so much, because that's why he's righteous. But I'll tell you what, if you take away the stuff he has, you have given him abundantly, he's going to start cursing you." And God said, "Come on, give me a break. I know Job. No, you're not going to do that." "No, God, you want to bet? Okay, you give me the power. Okay, if you're willing to. I'm not sure. I'm not sure if you're going to be willing to do that. But if you give me the power to take away what Job has, just give me the power, and I will show you how he's going to turn against you." And God says, "You know what? I knew something is wrong when I saw you sitting here." Okay. Okay, I know Job. Okay, I believe in my instincts. God is telling Job here, okay? And he said, "Okay, you have my authority to whatever you're just describing. I don't understand it at all, but I know I trust Job. Okay, let's just do it." Then what happens? Satan inflicts devastating losses on Job, taking his children, they all die, his wealth, and causing him physical ailments. So Job is going through a lot of devastation, catastrophic events in his life because Satan is playing this thing on him. He takes away one by one. So even Job's friends, they visit him, his very close friends, assuming his suffering must be due to some hidden sins that Job committed. But Job denies vehemently. He says, "No, you guys are wrong." Okay. So despite his friends' attempts to comfort him, Job, he takes a stand. This is a dramatic event in the entire Old Testament. I'm not joking. It's a dramatic event. Why? Because Job questions God's justice and cries out in anguish. Okay, what happens here, to be very specific, in a powerful display in Job chapter 38, God speaks directly to Job and he questions him, his understanding of God's power and the vastness of creation. Okay, this conversation is one of the amazing literatures in the whole Old Testament between God, what God tells Job. Then what happened? I don't want to create, I don't want to take too much time here. Okay, but after hearing God's voice, Job repents and submits to God's will. Remember, he just challenged God, okay, and he said that I, I have some questions for you. And they meet. Okay, God comes and meets Job and he's asking him a lot of questions, God himself. Now Job is he's shocked. He's not able to answer God's questions. So he starts to repent and he submits to God's will, acknowledging his limitations, acknowledging Job's limitations. So Job repented, this is the point here, by wearing sackcloth and by sitting in ashes. He not only wore ashes on his forehead, he actually brought a whole load of ashes and he sat on it the whole day. Okay. So Ash Wednesday teaches us this great lesson for all of us, what Job did. So Job saw the error and folly of his self-righteousness, and he desired to take the lowest place of humiliation. So compared with the pure and holy God, he saw that he was utterly vile and loathsome and was not unwilling now to confess it by wearing sackcloth and sitting in ashes. Okay, so what's the central theme of Job, the book of Job? So the book of Job explores the complex issue of suffering, particularly when good people face unjust hardships, and ultimately emphasizes the importance of faith and trust in God, even in the midst of trials and tribulations, right? So the next example I can give you is the book of Lamentations. So what the context? So the context of these passages in the book of Lamentations, multitudes of people perish by famine. So there's a great famine going on. It was so bad, even little children were slain by their mothers and they were eaten. It was so bad, like cannibalism going on. Multitudes fell by the sword. So there's chaos going on everywhere, fighting, people getting killed. So something is very wrong. So their false prophets also deceived the people. And the neighbors were laughing at people. Okay, so all this created some kind of comfort zone for the enemies. So the Jewish people's enemies, they're triumphant over these people. This is where the Assyrians came and conquered them, the Babylonians came and conquered them, then the Persians and the Medes and all this, the Jewish people have been conquered so many different times. So this is one of those times. So people are now lamenting. That's called the Book of Lamentations. Okay, lamenting. They are so powerless, and they're saying why this is going on for us. There's lamentations, right? So how do they do it? Sitting upon the ground, keeping silence, throwing dust on their heads, girding themselves with sackcloth. This is like a sackcloth is like with pins and needles inside, okay? And you're wearing them. Hanging down the head, not upright, hanging down the head. All of them had postures, actions, and gestures of mourners. They were mourning. The meaning of this whole verse is that the whole city of Jerusalem was in very sad state. Okay, so it was utterly like a mourner's field, and all persons in it in a mournful posture by throwing ashes on themselves. So you can see, my friends, the central role ashes played in the Old Testament. How about the book of Maccabees? So what the context? Okay, rather than just reading and then telling you, oh, there's the word ash there, this is the point. I want to give you the context, okay? So what's going on here? So, for example, the Maccabean revolt was a Jewish uprising against the Seleucid Empire. What's the Seleucid Empire? After Alexander the Great, the Seleucid Empire, there were two empires created by the generals of Alexander. And so they just kind of divided. So the Seleucid Empire was a Greek state. It was a Hellenistic kingdom. So the Hellenistic refers to Greek, okay? Um, in West Asia, that was ruled by the Seleucid dynasty. So it's a Macedonian Greek royal family. They were the Seleucid dynasty. Okay. So the uprising by the Jewish people was primarily sparked by the forceful Hellenization policies of this terrible man. Okay. His name is Antiochus IV Epiphanes. That's his name. What did he do he was just punishing the Jewish people. He was forcibly converting. Remember, Alexander the Great himself, he didn't conquer Israel. He came into Israel like a friend, believe it or not. You can check the history. There's no mention that Alexander conquered and took over the place. Why? Because he saw the Jewish people, they were already involved with the Greek philosophy and, like Aristotle, Plato, and, all those people, they were reading about them. And Jewish people are very smart. Okay. So why the, 1/10 of 1% of the Jewish population in the world, like 1/10 of 1% of the world population is Jewish, and they won more than, I think, like 25% of all the Nobel Prizes. That tells you something about the Jewish people, right? So they were just reading about the Greek, and they were somewhere even fascinated with the Greek philosophies and stuff like that. And Alexander the Great, he came to know about it. And that's why he walked into Jerusalem like a friend, almost like a visitor. But then when he died at a very young age, so what happened was his generals, they started fighting each other. Okay, this was happening. And one of them, a very bad character called Antiochus the Fourth Epiphanes, he wanted to convert the Jewish people by force. And this guy, he was such a mess. Okay, you know what he did? He went into the temple one day with a pig, and he sacrificed a pig in the temple of the Jewish people. Can you imagine desecrating the temple? It is a complete no-no for the Jewish people, okay? Taking the pig into the thing. And then he also did a lot of other things with the circumcision. He prohibited this and that. And so their practices, the Jewish religious practices were prohibited, desecrated the Jerusalem temple by placing a Greek idol there. Sorry, I forgot to tell you about this. He also brought an idol, which is a complete no-no for the Jewish people. The Jewish people, they just believe in one God, monotheism, right? So this guy brought an idol, a Greek idol, so and enforced the adoption of Greek customs as well. Okay, I'll give you a quick example of Greek custom. They brought these Greek people. The Olympics started in Greece, right? So they're all into sports and everything, and then they will just do their exercises in front of the Jerusalem temple in the nude without any clothes on them. Because that's just normal for the Greek people in those days. And for the Jewish people, it is an absolute abomination, right? But this is what this guy was doing. Antiochus the Fourth Epiphanes, okay? And no wonder the people were revolting against him. Okay, so this led to widespread Jewish resistance against the forced assimilation. Okay, I know the Jewish people, they are very good in thriving even in the diaspora. But the diaspora, all over the world, the Jewish people are just scattered, right? With after all these conquests, after the Roman conquest, Titus when he destroyed the temple, and then the Bar Kokhba, that sealed it. Okay, the Bar Kokhba revolt, that's it. They were completely decimated, the Jewish people, and they just went into all the corners of the world. It was called the diaspora. Even there, they just really prospered, and all of that. The beautiful story about the Jewish people. So they resisted all this persecution of their faith. So this rebellion was led by Matthias, okay, a very famous character in the Old Testament, and his sons. So notably, one of the sons called the Judas Maccabeus. Okay, I know I'm not pronouncing these names. Any Jewish friends, audience listening to this, my sincere apologies. Okay, so in Hebrew, probably sounds much more beautiful in the beautiful Hebrew language, but I'm just giving you my own with my background and English not my first language, so I do apologize. So Judas Maccabeus, I believe. So he's one of the sons who fought to preserve Jewish traditions and regain control of their religious practices. Okay. So what happened was, um, if you just go quickly here, they fasted for a day and put on mourning clothes, sprinkle ashes on their heads, and tore their garments. In addition, they opened up the law scroll to find answers to the kinds of questions Gentiles would ask. The Gentiles usually refer to non-Jewish people, Gentiles, okay, would ask of their idols. They also borrowed the priestly garments as well, early produce and tenth part gifts. So they stirred up Nazarites who had completed the duration of their solemn promises. Okay, so the point we're making is that how they fasted. They wore sackcloth, the mourning cloths are usually called the sackcloth, and they sprinkled ashes. Okay. So the next story, I'm almost done. Okay. One of the most beautiful stories in the Old Testament. And in fact, there is a festival. I'm trying to remember the Jewish people usually it's in March, sometime in the spring. It's one of the beautiful festivals. I'll get the name of the festival. Maybe I don't know. I will remember that. Okay, very short name of the festival where there's people. They wear some costumes. They eat some special kind of food on that day. Everybody's on the street, out on the street. They are celebrating. I'll tell you the story. It's a very beautiful story, and then we'll bring the ashes here. Okay. So, what the context of this whole thing in the Bible? Queen Esther was married to King, I think his name is pronounced as Ahasuerus, maybe? Yeah, Ahasuerus. Okay, that's the maximum I can do. Also known as Xerxes. Okay, he was the Xerxes the first. Okay, so he was a king of Persia. Remember the Babylonians, 586 BC, or before the Common Era. So they destroyed the temple, they took the Jewish people into exile, and then the Babylonians themselves were defeated by Persia. Okay. And then you must have heard about King Cyrus of Persia. Okay. So in the year 586 BC, of course, the mighty Babylonian Empire conquered the southern kingdom of Judah, and they destroyed the magnificent temple built by King Solomon. But then, few decades later, I believe in 540, 539 BC, before the Common Era, the Persian Empire defeated the Babylonian Empire. The Persian king Cyrus the Great led the Persian forces to victory, of course. Recall, it was only the Persian Empire that turned friendly to the Jews and even allowed them to practice their religion freely. So the king of Persia even allowed the Jewish people to return to Jerusalem, and he also provided even financing to rebuild the temple in Jerusalem, which was destroyed by the Babylonians in the year 586 BC under Nebuchadnezzar. Okay, so Esther was one of those people taken into exile into Babylon. How did she become the wife of King of Persia? She must have been like a slave girl. Okay. This is, if you read the Jewish history, it is one story of after another. Like, we just saw the Maccabees and everything, right? It's just amazing. It is so amazing, the Jewish history. Okay, you can never have enough of it. Okay, so look at the story of Esther. She was in exile, but Esther was a Jewish woman who was raised by her uncle Mordecai. Okay, Mordecai. So I think I'm pronouncing it correctly because I was just watching the news just a few days ago, and there was a guest. His name actually, he was a retired general, Jewish general. His name is Mordecai. The girl was, as they missed, General Mordecai. So I think I'm pronouncing it correctly. She was selected from a group of virgins to be a potential replacement for Vashti. That must sound familiar to you, Vashti, the king's previous wife. Oh, what happened to Vashti? Just so you know, Vashti was either executed or banished for a refusal to appear at the king's banquet to show off her beauty as the king wished. So this king had a bad habit. Okay, let's put it that way. Whenever he has some foreign guest visitors, he wanted Vashti to come and just show off. He will even ask her to dance in front of them and show herself. And she was so shy. Okay, she didn't want to do that. Not all the ladies. They just didn't come and just dance in front of some strangers. You don't know who these people are, but this guy had that a twisted, sorry, a very twisted thing, practice of making his wife dance in front of his dignitaries. Okay, just to show her off and everything. She refused. Well, he got upset. You know what he did? He just either he banished her, even though that's his wife, or he just killed her. Most scholars they think she was actually killed. Okay, so then he was looking for a wife, and this is the in the Jewish history. This is what happened again and again. Think of Joseph who went to Egypt as a slave, as a prisoner, right? And then he became the number two person next to the Egyptian pharaoh, right? And he saved the whole the country from famine. Okay, who would have thought of that? Same thing happens to Esther. It's a beautiful story. So what happened? Esther won the favor of the kings and eventually became the queen. To cut to the chase here, okay, to make a long story short. But then Queen Esther, she was a devout Jew more than anything else. So she kept her Jewish identity. She didn't just convert to into a Persian queen, and became very famous by becoming the wife of the king. She didn't do that. She practiced the Jewish, in secret. She was a practicing Jew in secret. She kept her identity. Okay. So she came to know that was a plot going on by one of the very senior advisors of the king to kill all the Jews. His name is Haman. Haman. Okay. So that's his name. This guy is a notorious figure in the history of the Persian kingdom, right? So he somehow convinced the king that the Jewish people they are conspiring against him or whatever he did with the king, right? So the king had a decree to completely annihilate or completely wipe out the Jewish people. And just imagine Esther is still practicing as a devout Jew, and then she comes to know about it. Because obviously the king would have told her, because the king doesn't know that she is Jewish, right? So he said, I'm going to wipe out, I've got an order out to Haman, and so Haman is going to just wipe them out because I heard that they're trying to overthrow me. So Haman was so, let me say, jealous of how good the Jewish people are doing in Persia. So he got jealous because he knew someday, they take political offices and things like that. So he just wanted to get rid of them. Okay. So Queen Esther, when she came to know about this plot to kill all her Jewish people, she fasted. She removed her beautiful garments and put on what? You guessed it, sackcloth. Okay. And she also adorned herself with ashes and get this, dung. Dung. Oh my Lord. Okay. So what I want to say here about this point, I think probably instructed by divine wisdom, the Catholic Church decided for their parishioners to be only adorned by ashes on their foreheads on Wednesdays, Ash Wednesday, and not with dung. Thank God for that. Okay, all the Catholics must be very thankful for that gesture by the church. Okay, back to Queen Esther. So she prayed for God's intervention and protection for the Jewish people who were facing imminent danger. Okay, so they were all going to be wiped out. And so Haman was getting the army ready because the king has already given him the authority to do that. So he was the chief advisor to the king as well. Okay. And so the whole Jewish community, they were fasting, put on sackcloth and wearing ashes for 3 days. Then she makes the dramatic move. She goes to the king. Okay. She approaches the king to plead for their life, for the Jewish people, and believing that prayer and fasting and wearing sackcloth and ashes and dung would give her the courage and favor needed to be successfully intercede on their behalf. Okay, so you can see, my friends, the whole theme is the ashes and sackcloth. They have such power because we are remembering who we are. We are just dust. Okay, so we're being humble. We show our humility. So you can see in these stories, the theme, the motif is the same, right? So then Esther and Mordecai convinced the king to stop an order to kill all the Jews in the empire. So this worked. So Esther risked her life to plead with the king to protect the Jewish people. And so this is why the Jewish people, they celebrate this every year. I think I'll remember the name of the festival. I'm just trying my best to remember that festival. So the king found out about the plot by Haman. So obviously, must have been some whistleblowers, among the army of the Haman. Maybe they thought that's very unfair to the Jewish people, and they are actually some of the Jewish people are in the army. They were serving in the army as well, right? So, but Haman was so he was shaky with his position. He thought the Jewish people would take over, but they're all backfired on him. Okay. So when the king came to know that Haman played the trick on the king, he hanged him. I mean, he killed him. The king killed Haman. He said, "We have to get rid of you. This is too much. You crossed the line." Okay. Oh, I remember now. I remember. Thank God I remember. It's called Purim. Purim. I think spelled as Purim. Okay, maybe you can Google it. P as in Peter, Urim. I'm pretty sure. So it's usually celebrated in the spring. Okay, either before Passover or after Passover. I don't know. So it's really a great holiday because it just celebrates the survival of the Jewish people from the decree of death by the Persian king, and it's a big deal. Okay, and this holiday is usually marked by joy and celebration and fun, and people they wear different costumes, decorations and things like that, and it's really fun. It's called Purim Festival. Okay, Purim. Okay, so we're almost done here with this beautiful story of Jonah. And if you haven't read the book of Jonah, you must read it. This is so funny and it's so dramatic and what Jonah does. So God actually tells Jonah to go by land to the city of Nineveh. So Nineveh is the capital of Assyria, which conquered Israel in, I think, 722 BC, before the Common Era. Okay. So they also took the 10 tribes of Israel. This is the legend of the 10 lost tribes of Israel. They were taken over by the Assyrians and they were scattered among the Gentiles. and it's such a mess. Okay. To this day, I'm recording this 2025. To this day, the 10 lost tribes are lost. Okay. So they say the British people or the Eskimos or, you know, Australians or New Zealanders or whatever it is. So they all these 10 lost tribes of Israel that came from them, whatever. Okay. All right. So we learned in the first chapter of the book of Jonah that God wanted Jonah to go to the place called Nineveh. It's a great city. To do what? To tell them that they had been bad people. Okay. Are you surprised? People are bad. They were just sacrificing their children to their gods, and there are so many gods and everything. Okay. And so it actually made the one true God mad. He was mad at them. Okay. But instead of doing what God wanted, Jonah tried to run away as far from Nineveh as possible. So God told him to go by road to Nineveh, going, I think, either east or west. I have to have the map in front of me. Anyway, but Jonah, he did the opposite. That's my point. So he didn't go by road. He went by sea on the opposite direction. He didn't want to do what God was asking him to do. So we know that Nineveh was a scary place for Israelites because the people there, they didn't like the Israelites, okay, Jews, and often were at war with the Israelites. So you may think that Jonah didn't want to go to Nineveh because he was scared he would get hurt. However, if you read the book of Jonah for yourself, you will discover that the answer is entirely different, okay? So let's just start off by looking at what actually happened when Jonah did end up in Nineveh. We have to cut to the chase, okay? We are talking ashes here. So we read in Jonah chapter 3 that the word of the Lord came to Jonah the second time, saying, Arise, go to Nineveh, that great city, and call out against it the message that I will tell you. So Jonah arose and went to Nineveh, according to the word of the Lord. Now Nineveh was an exceedingly great city, 3 days' journey in breadth. Jonah began to go into the city, going a day's journey. And he called out, like with a bullhorn from the top of the building, I guess, at 40 days, in 40 days, Nineveh shall be overthrown. Very clear message to the people of Nineveh and the king. Okay? Because of their sinful nature and what they were doing, in 40 days, if they don't change, the whole city will be overthrown. And the people of Nineveh believed God. Okay? So they believed what Jonah was saying. They called for a fast and put on sackcloth from the greatest of them to the least of them. Okay, whether you're a slave or you're an army general, they were all putting on sackcloth because they were such bad people. They were doing bad things. So what about the king? The word reached the king himself, okay, of Nineveh, and he arose from his throne, removed his robe, covered himself with sackcloth. Okay, this is not any Armani suit here, okay? This is sackcloth. I mean, he removes his Armani suit and he puts on the sackcloth and sat in what? You guessed it, ashes. He brought a whole lorry load of ashes. He wanted to make sure the whole city, everybody is looking at him sitting in ashes in repentance. And he issued a proclamation and published through Nineveh. And what did it say? By the decree of the king and his nobles, let neither man nor beast, herd nor flock taste anything. That means even he asked the animals to fast that day. Just imagine Jonah's word got through to him, okay? Because in 40 days, it's going to be the whole city, they were going to do a job on the city, okay? So now he's wearing the sackcloth and he's sitting in ashes, and he is ordering, okay, even the animal, not only people, the animals also, not to eat anything. Let them not feed or drink water, but let man and beast be covered with sackcloth, and let them call out mightily to God. So let them all pray to the God of Israel. Okay, this is it's a miracle that's happening here. Let everyone turn from his evil way and from the violence that is in his hands. Okay, so the king realized they're all their abominations and desolations, abominations, and now they are repenting by wearing sackcloth and ashes. So what happened then? God didn't destroy them. Okay, so God said, okay, they may not perish. That's it. So it's very, for God, it's very easy, like a couple of words, right? Okay, they may not perish means they're saved. Okay. So that's the story here, how they repented in sitting in ashes. So when God saw that they did what they did, how they turned from their evil way, God relented of the disaster that he had said he would do, and then he did not bring upon any disaster among them. Okay. So we're almost done. This is the final slide, I guess. One final question. Did our Lord Jesus mention ashes during his ministry? Okay. Hey, good question. So there's one passage in Matthew chapter 11, verse 21. It goes like this. Woe to thee. Okay, what does it mean? Woe unto thee means, I mean, you all shall be damned. Something like that. If you're New Orleans, okay, this is how you're going to say it. You all will be damned, right? You all will be damned. And he's specifically mentioning two cities. This is Jesus is talking, okay? So woe unto thee, like you all will be damned. Chorazin, okay, there's a name of one city, and woe unto thee, Bethsaida. So he's specifically mentioning two cities. Why? For if the mighty works which were done in you had been done in Tyre and Sidon, oh, now he's mentioning two more cities, they would have repented long ago in sackcloth and ashes. So Jesus is doing exactly what the people in the Old Testament they were doing. Remember, he said, I've come here not to abolish the law, but to what? Fulfill it. Okay. So I want to give you some context. I know there are Chorazin, and then we have Bethsaida, then we have Tyre and Sidon. I don't want to leave you with that. Okay. So just a little context before we close this. Jesus was angry about the two Jewish cities in the Galilee area. So this Chorazin and Bethsaida, they're actually located in the northern part of Israel, where Jesus grew up. And so when he started ministering, then this is the city that he would have gone, right? Because this within his backyard, so to speak. So why was he angry with this? Because he's almost like condemning them, right? He was angry because despite many miracles and great deeds, what he performed in these two towns, the people there showed no sign of repentance or changing their lives, essentially rejecting his message and failing to respond to the powerful signs he displayed. And they said, I don't know. I don't get it. Miracles, the president, was it Thomas Jefferson? I could be wrong. Okay. I think it was President Thomas Jefferson. He took the Bible and he took a pair of scissors. I think his wife was asking him, what are you going to do? Are you going to read the Bible or what are you going to do with the scissors? Well, let me show you what I'm going to do. So he turned each page where there's a miracle, he cut them out. So this was known as the so-called the Thomas Jefferson Bible with a lot of holes in them, right? Because he cut out all the miracles. He didn't believe them. Okay, so in other words, could we easily say that he didn't believe in Jesus' teaching? Because this way Jesus was upset because all the miracle that he displayed, all the good things, all the good deeds he performed in these two towns, Chorazin and Bethsaida, the people are just, I don't know about this. It's too much for me. I don't believe in this. Okay, whatever. And they continued in their own way of living. Okay, and then what happened was essentially rejecting his message and failing to respond to the powerful signs he displayed. This lack of faith and unwillingness to turn from sin deeply offended and frustrated Jesus because this is own Jewish people. So leading to his rebuke of these cities. And this is why he says, woe to you, Chorazin, and woe to you, Bethsaida. Okay. Then so Jesus even said, he actually made it more concrete, his how he made it so obvious how he was so mad by bringing on these two names of these two cities like Tyre and Sidon, and which will make the Jewish people so mad at him. Why? Because these two cities, Tyre and Sidon, they're in the Gentile territory. These are pagan cities. Okay. So what he said was just to rub it in. Okay. He said that if I had performed miracles in Tyre and Sidon, these which were pagan cities and considered more sinful, they would have repented with sackcloth and ashes by wearing sackcloth and sitting in ashes, or wearing ashes in their forehead. Okay. So this really rubbed them very badly because they know Tyre and Sidon, they're the sinful city, they're pagan, they're Gentile, whatever it is, okay, pagan. So now Jesus is saying, if I had gone there and I did the thing what I did for you guys, they would have repented, but you guys are not repenting. So you're worse than them. That's what he's saying. So this story serves as a warning against complacency, in my opinion. And it really highlights the importance of actively responding to God's grace and his teachings. Okay, but these people, Chorazin and Bethsaida, they didn't do that. Okay, all right. So the Catholic Church followed the tradition from the Old Testament, from what you've done, what you've seen here. And before I close, I'd like to make a book recommendation. Okay, so this is Anne Widdecombe, a very nice author. She's written a lot of different books. And one of her books is called Sackcloth and Ashes. So with that, we will conclude this video. And thank you for watching. And I may see you in another video. Thanks, everyone.